Hello guys, this is Aloysius Anderman here, or Alex Julian, and I will give a toast to you over Mountain Dew Frostbite, over a review I'm going to do for a Nintendo Entertainment System classic called Double Dragon 2 The Revenge NES game. So this will be a NES game review for something of the Nintendo Entertainment System. And I have played the game on the Nintendo Switch controller here, and also on the Nintendo Switch itself. And I can even point to the exact game here. And it shows you the game of Double Dragon 2 The Revenge. This is the NES game here, and you can even hear it. But I won't sample it there for longer than that. You know, just to make it better for copyright purposes and leave it a mystery for the review. But I want to just show you that image on this Nintendo Switch console here to show you what game I'm speaking of. Now, it is a fighting game, of course. It is a fighting game. And let me give a toast to that. Because, you know, fighting games can be interesting sometimes. Especially when you have an old console with very effective auto buttons. That's a good frostbite of Mountain Dew. But let's think about it more carefully, if we may think about it. What is more better when it comes to pleasure? This frostbite of Mountain Dew, or a rubber ducky? Or a rubber ducky that looks like Robin, or a rubber ducky that's green, or a rubber ducky that is kind of broken and almost squished, or like dices of different colors in which even when the chances are the same, the colors can trick you into thinking that there's a difference with the game. And definitely, this is my metaphor of the whole entire library of the Nintendo Entertainment System. This, see? You see these dice. You see that there's blue. You see that there's red. You see that there's green. And you see these dice, and you would think with your prejudice and superstitions of colors that these dice would make a difference because of the colors. But in a lot of cases with video games on the Nintendo Entertainment System, you just get different colors of dice, and the chances are pretty much the same. And you might as well just roll the dice here. And there you go. Maybe I get 6, 6, 5, 1, 2, 3, whatever. So whatever the dice says, whatever this dice says, whatever this dice says, or whatever this dice says, in many cases it doesn't really matter, because in the end it's still going to be Donkey Kong, it's still going to be Super Mario Brothers, it's still going to be Kirby. I mean, and in fact a lot of the goodness of the Nintendo Entertainment System, if I may remind you that my review is for Double Dragon 2 The Revenge NES game, a lot of the goodness of it was from the colors. And so you would be happy to see like all these wonderful things of, you know, rubber duckies and colorful dice here, as I could point them out here. And you would hope that by rolling the dice and getting different numbers that it makes a difference. And there would even be the high score of points, like the high score of points you can get for Pac-Man, or the high score of points you could get for Frogger. And just recently, with these items that you could see at my table here of the rubber duckies and this dice, these are located around a pizza place or a bar and fun and entertainment and arcade kind of restaurant. And in this restaurant called P-Dubs, I was playing a game called Frogger. You probably remember the game Frogger. I was playing the original, the actual original game Frogger. where you take your frog character and hop over a road and hop over a river and hope that your frog mates with a queen in the nest at the end of the finishing line. Frogger was a popular classic. Now it is getting more and more obscure. More and more people have not heard of it very much. And when I was playing the game on the original arcade mechanics, I was kind of disappointed because it turns out that I actually enjoy the Atari 5200 version of Frogger better, because the Atari 5200 Super System, that video game system, although the joysticks were at times easy to break and easy to mismanage, the complexity and complexion and the flavor and the substance of Frogger on the Atari 5200 was substantial. Everything was wonderful and a surprise with the nice colors and gameplay, especially when I formed something very much of a small habit of playing Frogger on the Atari 5200. Whereas on the other hand, when I was playing the arcade, even with the joystick that I was playing with in the arcade for the original Frogger, it felt like even when there was a joystick, it felt like I just had this direction pad most of the time. And for Frogger, that turns out to be less of an effective thing from my experience, because Frogger could use more dimensions into the spaces of directions into other locations for the instructions. And for that reason, it's actually more of an interest, a special interest, if you will, of a complexity to challenge yourself to Frogger with more buttons, like, you know, like more of these and 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 more of these, you know, and to challenge yourself and maybe even get into more buttons on this, like more grips and everything. Whereas the original joystick was just, well, that old arcade joystick was just a joystick, and the gimmick was flicky with strict lines of entry into the nests. And I was a little bit disappointed on that confrontation of restriction to entry into the nests. It was actually the Atari 5200 version of Frogger that was really substantial with the entry into the nests and with the waters and gates and lands and everything. And I did try this game called Double Dragon 2, the Revenge Nest game. I will get back to this Nest game that I was talking about in this review, and that I am actually reviewing in this video. And what do I think of this Nest game? I think when you increase the number of moves that your fighter can do, if I may get your attention on it, when you increase the number of fighting moves, that does not necessarily increase the fighting. In fact, increasing the number of moves can actually put a damp on the fighting. It can actually put a hard sponge on the fighting, and it can feel like I have to gravitate through the spores and the holes and the dig out spots over and over and over again just to try to make sense of a helicopter that is not friendly to the plane of 8-bit dimensions on the square and hip of the 80s, and maybe of a little bit of the early 90s, if we imagine things enough. Now, with that in mind, I mean, yes, there were these fighters in Double Dragon 2, The Revenge that were colorful and everything, and maybe their faces were more substantial to their complexions, especially with their, you know, with their sort of white cheekbone sort of display of their anger and revenge towards the gang members for the death of their girlfriend. But that story in of itself is really, in modern terms, irrelevant to the game, and it's really the clickety stuff, like the buttons that you would click on the controller here, like the buttons that you would click on here, that would matter really the most. And with that in mind, the fighting was corny and pretty ridiculous and not very effective. Even when I would know the moves, I would even start to hate doing the moves, because in order to do some of the moves, you are required to like do some really outrageous and dumbass stuff of point and receive to the direction of the conflict. And with that in mind, it was like, oh my god, I do not know if I should turn backwards to kick, or if I should push both buttons to really go forward, or if I should like jump in the air and hope that I land back down on the same spot. And some moves turned out to be just ineffective, even when the moves did exist. And even with the same buttons, it would be like, I would push the buttons and the things would land on the spot, even when the spot needed not to be there, and when the moves needed not to be there, and therefore it was just a trick and a gimmick of NES graphics and NES visuals and this whole Nintendo Entertainment home arcade stuff. And a lot of that home arcade stuff was inflated beyond the Atari 5200 Super System release and got into this ridiculous level of, let's just take a couple of buttons and click them really fast to make them seem like we're challenging ourselves, when really we're just getting fooled into all these rubber duckies and colorful dice that you see here. And that's my summary of the game, where it's like, it was so many numbers, it was so many shapes, but it did not give me the actual conflict of the construction. And you take care, and God bless.